the Arab world and the Muslim world trust the America if they just, or the West if they behave that way.
Okay, Ambassador. Thanks very much for your
Thank
time.
you very
Extraordinary
much.
events
Thank you.
and shocking in your country.
Yeah,
Thanks for talking.
It is a horrible situation.
Well, in another development, speaking to Al Jazeera earlier, Libya's deputy envoy to the UN, Ibrahim Dabashi, condemned Gaddafi's actions. We've been hearing similar thoughts here in the studio in Libya, and called on the international community to investigate those crimes against humanity. Earlier, he spoke to my colleague Kamal Santamaria.
Well, what's going Libya is a real genocide against the Libyan people. The Colonel Gaddafi is shooting his own people, and really the international community has to take a clear position about against the regime. I think they cannot wait much longer. What's going now cannot keep anyone silent.
So you, even as an ambassador, as part of the ambassadorial team to the United Nations from Libya, clearly do not agree with anything that this regime is doing at the moment. Do you consider yourself a defector from that government which put you there?
Well, we don't agree with anything the regime is doing. We are in the service of the people, according to even the Colonel Gaddafi philosophy. We are in the service of the people. We have never been in the service of the regime, and now we are in the disposition of the Libyan people to serve him. Certainly, the Libyan mission to the United Nations is the Libyan people's mission, and we are here to serve the Libyan people.
Have you had any contact, or has your team had any contact either with Colonel Gaddafi or with other members of the regime?
We don't have any contacts really with any official of the regime.
Are you worried about making such public comments against the regime?
No, I am not worried at all. I am worrying about the Libyan people. I am not worrying about my own safety. I am worrying about the safety of the Libyan people. The people are being shot in the streets. I am nothing with the sacrifices of the Libyan people.
So what should,
in comparison with the sacrifice of the Libyan people.
So if you could speak to Colonel Gaddafi right now, what would you suggest he does?
I don't speak to Colonel Gaddafi. The only thing I tell him on the air now, he has to get out. Either he get out or the Libyan people will kick him out anyway. So that's what he has to know, and I think he knows it. He knows it, and he is trying to just delay his fate.
Do you believe this entire regime is now crumbling? A lot of the guests we've had on Al Jazeera have been saying they think this is, it looks like the end of this regime.
Yes, I think it is the end of the game. I think the fact he's continuing to kill his own people is the fact that the whole regime is crumbling, and we will soon see the fall of this regime.
You must be speaking to other members of the international community there at the United Nations. What are they saying to you? Is anyone showing that they would involve themselves in any way?
You know, it is a holiday today in the United States and the United Nations. Also, we don't have much contacts with the members of the United Nations, and certainly we will try our best to have something done by the United Nations to stop this genocide against the Libyan people.
Well, that was a talk at the United Nations. Our Scott Heidler is also there. It's been a very busy day. Can you talk us through the event, Scott?
Sure, you bet, Jane. And yeah, just going off a little bit what Mr. Dabashi was saying right there. He also said, you know, yes, it is a holiday here, so the Security Council had no meetings planned today. But we do know that he is asking members of the Security Council, probably the P5, the permanent 5 members, to bring up this issue in the Security Council. And once that happens, if that happens, it's going to be interesting how it's discussed because, you know, in previous days, weeks, we did not see the situation in Egypt brought up to the Security Council because they said they viewed it as a domestic issue. So it'll be very interesting to see how they differentiate the situation in Libya to what was happening the last couple of weeks in Egypt. Is Libya now an international situation, meaning that because these planes, the defectors, the colonels in the Air Force, went to Libya, took the aircraft, landed in in Malta. Does that make this an international issue? Or even more so, what they're going to say about the situation, from what we're hearing, the reports we're hearing, they're asked to bomb civilians, and will that then prompt the United Nations to act, specifically the Security Council to act? So that's really what we're going to be looking at probably in the hours to come.
And
Jane?
some of the demands made, for example, no-fly zone, how will that work?
Yeah, that will probably have to go through the Security Council, and it depends on if they, how quickly they're able to put together, agree upon wording of some kind of resolution to be put forth, to be tabled in the Security Council, and how strongly worded they're able to get it through and through quickly. That no-fly zone, when you look at that, you really have to break it down, because who's going to enforce that? Are there UN member states who are willing to volunteer aircraft immediately to be able to enforce that no-fly zone? So that part of a potential resolution has some moving parts that have to be worked through. But you can imagine that, as we heard from the number 2 at the Libyan mission to the United Nations, they want action, and they want action now.
Interesting that Ban Ki-moon was able to speak to Muammar Gaddafi and report back. What came out of that?
Yeah, this was one of the very first things we heard today. A statement put out by the Secretary General Ban Ki-moon's press office this morning say that they had a lengthy conversation, and in that Ban Ki-moon asked Muammar Gaddafi to stop the violence against protesters, that all sides, and this is kind of the wording we've seen again over the last couple of weeks of the unfolding situation in North Africa, that all sides scaled down the violence. And it was a little bit more strongly worded, not much, but a little bit more strongly worded than we saw previous statements like this coming out of Ban Ki-moon's office. But it was interesting that the two spoke this morning, because we haven't heard anything else from Muammar Gaddafi really since.
Okay, Scott, thank you for that. Let's cross to Barbara Sarah in London for some reaction from Europe on the uprising in Libya. Barbara.
Jane, thank you. Yes, a lot of strong reaction from European leaders, although perhaps the most intriguing comments have come from the British Foreign Minister. He suggests that Gaddafi might have already left Libya. Rory Challens is at the Foreign Office with more on that.
Well, yes, some intriguing language coming from William Hague today. Earlier on in the day, he abandoned the usually tame diplomatic talk that accompanies these kind of things, and came out and said that what he's calling what is going on in Libya deplorable and unacceptable, and that the Libyan ambassador was to be summoned here to this office where I'm standing to be given a dressing down. He turned up at about 12 o'clock local time and was talked to by diplomats here, and they outlined their condemnation of what's going on in Libya and the use of lethal force on the streets of Libya. Now then, a few hours later, William Hague came out again, spoke to reporters and said that he thought that there was a possibility that Muammar Gaddafi wasn't actually in the country anymore. Let's have a listen to what he said about that.
You asked me earlier on about whether Colonel Gaddafi is in Venezuela. I have no information that says he is, although I've seen some information that suggests he is on his way there at the moment.
So he said there is a possibility that Muammar Gaddafi is actually on his way to Venezuela. Well, after that happened, the Venezuelan governments came out and said that that is not the case. They have no information on where Muammar Gaddafi is,